We are here today to discuss what happens with Charlotte at the end of Tyler Perry's 2008 film, The Family That Prays.
The last time we see Charlotte, she's standing in front of a medicine cabinet with reminder Post-it notes, and then we see her funeral near the close of the film. But what exactly happened to Charlotte?
I'm Heit.
And I'm Cheri.
And you've discovered Axiom Amnesia.
We want to thank all of the supporters who helped to make this video possible. If you want your name to appear alongside these contributors, make a one-time donation via Cash App, or you can head on over to patreon.com/axiomamnesia to enjoy all of the benefits of becoming a monthly subscriber.
Of course, there will be spoilers.
Yes, as usual. So if you have not seen The Family That Prays and you're concerned about ruining the film for yourself, go ahead and just hop off the call right now, and we'll catch you once you've seen the film. But basically, we need to just give a little bit of context about what's happened in the film to this point before we see Charlotte standing in front of this medicine cabinet. So Charlotte is a very rich woman who runs the family business, right? They're like a construction business, and she has received an Alzheimer's disease diagnosis. And so that leads her to kind of go on this bucket list road trip with her good friend Alice, who's played by Alfre Woodard. And by the way, it's actually Kathy Bates is actually the actress who plays Charlotte. And so they go on this road trip together, you know, just basically Charlotte's last hurrah. While they're on the road trip, it becomes evident that something is wrong with her to her best friend or her close friend, Alice. And then that's when we find out that, you know, she's got this dementia going on and stuff like that. And, you know, this road trip is really kind of her last hurrah. And so she's also got this dynamic going on with her son, who wants to run the family business, where he's tried to double cross her and backstab her and everything like that. And so in the film, she makes moves to maintain control of the business. And it's all wonderful at the end of the movie where, you know, she brings out her friend Alice and some guy that's been appeared to be an unhoused guy who looks like he doesn't have any money. They come out and say, hey, we are, you know, the silent board members and I still have control of the company. And that's not important to this conversation, which is why I'm glazing over it. But basically, just know that at the end, Alice is still in control of her company. Nobody is running her or anything like that. But, you know, that's what happens. So then after we see Alice have this big win at her company, she's fired her son and everything. Then we see her by herself in her home in front of this cabinet, medicine cabinet. And then after that, she's just gone. So it's probably good for us to just go ahead and take a look at this scene so that we can review it together and, you know, comment on what we think we see, and then we'll go from there. So the obvious first question we have is, what exactly happened to Charlotte? Did she take herself out? The film seems to imply maybe. But it's not completely addressed directly. And so let us talk about what we have just seen. So Alice is standing in front of the cabinet, and she has these Post-it notes that are intended to remind her of things and orient her to reality. But the Post-it note that is the most clear is that God loves you. That was the one that kind of stood out to me. And so she's just looking. And then the next thing we see is her open the cabinet, and she takes out like 5 or 6 bottles out of the cabinet.
Right.
And then she closes the cabinet. And then after that, we don't see Charlotte anymore.
Right. And then Alice gets a call.
Hello? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we know. And then we got the funeral scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, Alice got that call that she's gone. I just wanted to jump in here to encourage you to join our free Patreon tier. Yes, we have premium paid memberships on Patreon and YouTube channel members who get exclusive content, early releases, and other perks. But we are now also offering a free Patreon membership tier where you will get videos that are not offered to the general public on YouTube. For example, we just dropped a 3.5-hour watch party for the new Luther Never Too Much documentary on our free tier, where you get to watch the full movie along with us in our commentary. If you like what you see, you can join one of our paid membership tiers later, or you can just remain as a free member with no strings attached. This free Patreon membership does not give you access to all of the paid exclusive content and early releases that our premium Patreon and YouTube channel members enjoy, but we wanted a way to offer you a better viewing experience without many of the restrictions that we have on this platform. So come on over and join us on Patreon. The link is in the description. It's easy and free to join. You can simply log in with your Google or existing social media accounts and begin enjoying Axiom Amnesia's Patreon. Now back to the show. And so now that we've really watched this a lot more closely, I definitely think that Charlotte ended it. What do you think?
I think so, but so there's the question of whether or not she could have forgotten or that she take her medication, right? But it depends on how much of these types of medications would actually cause you to, to take you out, right?
So like an accidental, taking too much.
Right. So, but let's say you took certain medications 3 times a day. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the end result. Right. It depends on the medication itself. So I don't know how likely that could be, but I don't know what type of medication this person would be on and, the ramifications of taking higher doses.
We might have to get Dr. Pratt involved. Dr. Pratt is the emergency room physician that we will oftentimes have come and talk to us about the medical parts of these various scenes that we see in movies and explain them to us and tell us what's reasonable and logical and all of that from a medical perspective. So maybe he can weigh in on this at some point. But the one thing I did notice is that she had like individual, prescription bottles, right? And so sometimes I think that, like how they'll have those organizers for your different medication and stuff like that. So then that way that keeps you straight to know, hey, today is Tuesday and I've taken my morning dose, my afternoon and evening dose, whatever. She just had the bottles in there. So there wasn't any real clear organizing. And if she's getting forgetful, it certainly seems within the realm of possibility that she could have mistakenly, had accidentally taken more than what she should have.
But the way that they showed her just grab all of the bottles in that manner, it looked like something dramatic was about to happen.
Yeah, and the music, right? The music, and then she closes the cabinet, and then symbolically, like this music is playing, and then she closes the cabinet. It's like she's closing the door. She has done everything she needed to do. She's maintained control of her life up to this point, her business, and, and that's it. And then we see Alice get that call that she's gone. And then, Alice starts to go into her monologue.
When Charlotte died, it brought a lot of hurt.
And, we see the funeral scene after that. But so I think it's definitely possible that that it was an accident. But I think it's also just as possible that it was intentional because we saw her struggle, right, with the frustration of losing herself in a way, right? Losing her memory, wanting to her already grieving the loss as she is aware that she's losing it.
And then the way that, she opens she's looking at the mirror and the notes, it isn't as if I'm looking for a specific note. It's kind of like, man, this is the situation that I'm in, and that's
it's
sort
only
of a
going to get
thoughtful
worse.
way.
Yeah. And so I don't know, like, it just as I reflect on this,
It may be the most clever thing that Tyler Perry has ever done.
Which is interesting because I was going to bring this up because we always talk about how Tyler Perry is like Captain Obvious. Everything that is already obvious, he's going to spell out and make it be said in dialogue, and the typical Tyler Perry, he would have had Alice at the funeral be like, and she's just decided to take it in her own hands, and but this is not what happens here. And so I do think that this was a bit of genius in having it be a subtle touch because so many people because and by the way, we do have multiple videos on the family that prays. We have a rundown. We have different parts that we have broken down. So be sure to check those out here on this channel. But, when I think about everything, he's not being Captain Obvious here. It's a hint of subtlety. And that is so important. And maybe it's just because it's a controversial issue and you just don't want that to be the center point of everything. But I kind of...
but maybe the studio or the distributor, Lionsgate, was just like, we can't, you just can't, don't say it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You just allude to it. I don't know. But either way, we got what we got.
Yes.
And that's attributed to Tyler Perry.
Yes. And so, and but a lot of people in the comments of those other videos mentioned that they totally missed this part of the film. Like they did not get that this was Alice doing this, right? Whether intentionally or accidentally, right? And that they just, the point that they got, which was the bottom line point, which is that she eventually, went out of here and we saw the funeral. But the other thing is, it's not always clear in films what the proximity is.
Right.
Okay, we saw her looking in there, but was this the same night when Alice gets the call? We kind of assume because it's the next scene, but how many movies have we seen where it's not actually the next day? Some time has passed, but there isn't anything that makes us believe time has passed because it's nighttime when Alice, I think, gets the call. And it's also nighttime the last time that we see Charlotte. So it makes us feel like it's the same. Whereas if it was daytime and Alice was in her diner when she gets the call, then maybe we could have had a different conclusion about how much time had passed. Another thing I think is important is to just, because, we always try to tie things back to what's real, not just our own speculations about how all of this works. And so we looked up and we found a Yale study, because how many people who are diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's specifically choose to take matters into their own hands and, do what it seems like Charlotte did in this film. And so I want to read you a little bit from this article that talks about a Yale study. And so it says that adults over age 65 who've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease or other dementia are more than twice as likely to leave here at their own hands as compared to older adults who do not suffer from dementia, according to this new study by a Yale Department of Psychiatry researcher. And this is from 2021, so it's a few years old, but it's still new technically, right? And, I am being careful about the language that we use just because we want to be respectful. So hopefully, please don't take the fact that we're not using certain words, and we would prefer if you avoid those words in the comments as well. But anyway, so the findings that were published and whatnot, they reveal that the risk of a person choosing to do this was particularly elevated among adults aged 65 to 74 in the first 90 days following the dementia diagnosis. Because, and also the patients who were diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia were also found to be at a higher risk of, going out of here as a result of, at their own hands, right? And so it's interesting that in this
first year deaths as well.
Yeah. And in this first 90 days or in this first year, and I wonder why that is, because I'm not quite sure about, when most people are diagnosed. Is it after you've been having issues for a while? Is it different for everybody? I know in the comments, and we're going to get to some of your comments about this too.
And is it because of the disease or because of the treatment of the disease?
Or the choice that you don't want what's happening to progress. To progress. Yeah. You're making the decision that I don't want to have this slow end this way. And that's tough, but one of the people in the comments had brought up, and we'll get to that comment later, about how one of their parents had this issue, but it was a quick onset. And so different people have different number one, different dementia-related diseases and different quicknesses of onset, right? And, if something comes on really fast, you may not even really have time to contemplate versus if something comes on very slow and, today it's where are my keys and tomorrow it's just still where are my keys, and it takes months and maybe even years for, things to progress. So when you have that situation and it's going very slow, it might be different. But when we look at the film and we see Charlotte, it was interrupting her life. Like she was having these moments of crisis where and panic, right? Which was very scary, because imagine if you have points where you don't know what's going on and you're aware that you don't know what's going on too,
right.
So this is something that a lot of people are having to deal with. And again, we always talk about in these films, what makes them relatable is because a lot of times we know people who are going through these things, or we have known people who have gone through these things, or we or our family may be going through them right now. And so this is just yet another dimension that is added when we're looking at films like this. And so I think it'd be good to go, to the comments that you guys gave to us about this. So we did a poll not that long ago, and we asked, in the movie The Family That Prays, do you think that Charlotte, Kathy Bates' character, took herself out because she did not want to let the Alzheimer's disease take her? And tell us why you think this in the comments. 80% of you say yes, she did, that you believe she did. 13% of you say no, she did not. And 7% of you say, I cannot decide. And so we'll just go through some of the comments there. And so the first person who commented that we saw was Groovy Kid, who says, I believe she did because of how frustrated that she would get when she was forgetful of things, and that's why she went on the trip with Alice. And we did see that on the trip, like how she would get frustrated if she forgot something, or like when Alice finally realizes that something serious is going on with her friend when she's not sure what's exactly going on. And even before the trip, when Charlotte was in the house and it was all dark and everything like that, and Alice comes in like, hey, we're going on this trip, girl. We're seeing kind of depression and other parts of her orientation to reality be altered along the way in the film as it was depicted. So I definitely agree with you there. Then we have Dejanay, who says, I think she genuinely made peace with everything and just didn't care anymore. And that's an interesting way to look at it because, back to that Post-it note where she's like, God loves you. At the end of the day, she knew what the end would be, and she just maybe decided that she was going to do things on her own terms and that she just didn't want to suffer what it looked like the future would hold for her. And, she made peace with things. And then we have a comment that is from Brother JF, who says, she was losing the battle. She had sticky notes in her bathroom to remind her about everything in her life. The car trip with Alice was a goodbye. Most people before ending things start acting happy or give their stuff away. And her final wish was to make sure that her son didn't get the company. And like we pointed out, that is something that was covered in the film. Like, she won that battle. We didn't, her son wasn't going to get the company. He was fired and the company was left in good hands. So all of her hard work throughout the years, although we can debate if she, because they were the family that prayed, we can debate about how, were they good works that led to, her wealth and all of that. It wasn't going to fall into bad hands. At least not at that point. It wasn't going to fall into the hands of her son. And so, she had done what she felt she needed to do there. Trey Griffin says, I always interpreted it as she forgot how much of her meds she took and basically took too much, but not intentionally. And somebody else added to that comment and says, right, because she was forgetful, and it definitely was there, but not so bad that the audience was expecting it, right? And that's a good point, because people, I didn't particularly pick up on that as the most, because so much crazy stuff happens in the movie that you're caught up in that you might even just miss what actually happened to Charlotte. So then we have Can I Kick It? And she is the commenter who I mentioned earlier. And she said, my mom has dementia and it's heartbreaking. She had always said that she would rather not go on than to lose her mind. Her onset happened very rapidly, but it had been slow. I always wonder if she would have made the same choice. Nonetheless, I am thankful for every day I get to spend with her. And our response to her was, thank you for sharing your real life experience with this. It can be so hard when we have parents who are ailing and there is nothing that we can do to fix it. I imagine that having more time to contemplate what is happening and being aware of at the same time is extremely difficult. And I'm glad your mom has you. And she responded back, that was so nice of you to respond in such a thoughtful way. Thank you so much. And it's stories like this that make us reflect, that humanize and give us ties to real life things that are happening to people that are represented in these fictional stories that we see on film. But like, these are real life things that happen to people all the time. And I appreciate so much when you trust us to share your personal stories with us, because we do share some personal things with you too. And, you know, as a person who, you know, well, I've shared with you that my dad passed away in 2019, but, you know, he had been ill prior to that. And it is so hard to see someone who you love suffering and be sick for a long period and, you know, have a long illness. It's very difficult, and it's such a helpless feeling. And it is the part of life a lot of times as you get older that you wind up having to deal with all of these different sorts of losses. And, you know, and so it's nice to know that you're not alone in having these experiences, and that other people can relate to them in a way that makes you be able to say, okay, I can kind of gain strength or see that they got through it, et cetera, et cetera. And so the next commenter brought up, the next person, Jacob K, said, she did all she could when she was still able. Usually immediate family gains power of attorney, and her son could try to undo some of those things by saying that she wasn't in her right mind, or even that the people she helped took advantage of her condition. Charlotte completed her goals and made sure no one could change anything. No one would control her decisions, and she made damn sure of that. And, you know, it reminds me of something that we see right now that's going on with like Wendy Williams and other people who have these conservatorships, and people who are sort of in charge of their life at varying points. And we saw it with Britney Spears and guardianships, or whatever you call them. And even just as we see situations where people are said, people who have a lot of money especially, and they have other people who swoop in, whether that's like somebody that they marry who's, you know, they're 90 and the person is 20. You know, I think about Anna Nicole Smith marrying that Texas billionaire, and the fight with the family over the money and stuff like that. It really, you know, just kind of makes me think about how that is, because it's a balance, right? You want to protect people, but it also leaves situations open, like in this movie, for her son to try to take advantage. And surely if her son knew, he would have been using that against his mother to get his way, right? And so, you know, that's something to consider. And then the next commenter, Sam David Jr., says, yo, I missed the part where this was even a possibility. What the hell? And yeah, a lot of people missed this in the film, that it looked like maybe she really, you know, took things into her own hands. And then we have White Phoenix Crown, who says she was a strong, independent woman who chose to take herself out rather than becoming dependent due to the disease. And it, you know, a lot of people would agree with that. Then we have the next person, Natasha, who says, I didn't even realize that she took herself out. I guess I didn't process that information at all. And again, with so much stuff that happened in this movie, and some of it, you know, being salacious and it just draws you in, this was something that was subtle and not very obvious, and so many people missed it. And then we have Juice Flicks, who says, I hope you dance. And they are referencing in the film the song I Hope You Dance, which was sung by Gladys Knight. And it's beautiful lyrics, you know, basically talking about, you know, like a song to your daughter or whatever, but you're saying, I hope you dance. When you get the chance, you know, to sit it out or to dance, I hope you dance. I hope you take the chance. I hope you go out there and live life, right? It's kind of the message of that song, which is a really beautiful song. And then the final comment that we can talk about comes from Marcel Zachary, which is a little different, but Marcel said, I really don't like this one. Most of Tyler Perry movies have are basically disappointing for me. And I was curious, so I just said, let me ask, you know, do you like any of Tyler Perry's films, or, you know, which one is best to you? And so the person said 688 was the best Tyler Perry film to them. And that's the most recent one that he just did, that talked about the women in World War II, you know, the black women's, was it a regimen? 688.
I think it was a regiment. No, a battalion.
A battalion.
Male battalion.
It was the male battalion that helped to make sure that all this mail that had not been delivered got delivered to the servicemen over in Europe. And so they solved a huge problem. And so he noted that. And then, but other than that, he's no Stanley Kubrick or Martin Scorsese, right? Who are other, really popular and renowned directors. And so the response that we gave was, I hear you. I try to respect him for what he does do well. And that's these ratchet movies with moral dilemmas and that have wide appeal. And I would love to see him develop his talents to tell historical stories better, like with 6888, right? And maybe the issue is that he is not the best filmmaker, but that he can tell a good story. And I asked that as more of a question.
Yeah. And that was kind of what would make a good filmmaker to some people, right? Because it's what you value in the films, right? So if you think it's a good story, then maybe he's a good filmmaker.
Right. And so again, I think that every filmmaker has their angle, their thing, even among popular ones like Black ones. Spike Lee is not the same as Lena Waithe, is not the same as Ava DuVernay, right? Or John Singleton, they're not all the same. And it's okay that they're not the same, and they have different interests because they're artists, right? Ultimately, and they present differently. And I think we have to be careful about maybe characterizing the way that that a particular artist presents to say that this means you have more or less talent in an area. Because believe me, there are people a lot of people love Tyler Perry's films. And I think that as we have broken down a number of his different films in the discussion points, if they were all trash, we wouldn't be able to break them down this way. Now, I would say that it's kind of like if I looked at literature too, though, sort of the way that I would look at a book like Alice Walker's The Color Purple versus maybe an urban fiction novel, which is more of guilty pleasure for me that I like to read, right? One I would call, hey, this is real literature, but I enjoy both of them just as much, right? There's a place for all of that there in writing. And I think it's much the same in film as well. So, I'll say that.
Yeah, because it kind of reminds me of, what's that movie? Was it Granddaddy, the movie?
Oh, yeah, Granddaddy, I think, yeah. Where it was taking place over, like, he was a runaway enslaved person. And then, it goes all the way up through to, like, into the 70s and stuff. And it's like, okay, wait, this dude would be, like, 100 and something years old.
No, I don't think that's what happened. I think he was supposed to be in those times, but they just had modern things. It just made it not
they
make
just
sense.
didn't. Yeah, so it was like cars and whatever. So there was problems, but the story was interesting and it kept us watching for
I
an
don't know
hour
about
and a half.
that. What I was gonna say is there's nothing to break down there.
Well, you might be right. Well, you could break down all the things that were wrong. Like they have, they have channels that are just dedicated to everything wrong with this movie. Or I've seen videos like that. So. Yeah, but this was something we definitely wanted to cover about Charlotte and the family that prays. We spent a lot of time arguing over whether Alice was right, the fact that she kept her being a millionaire from her family and her having money but presenting herself like she didn't, and family members making certain decisions in their lives. We won't rehash that discussion. You can listen to those and watch those other videos. But this was something we shouldn't ignore, and I'm glad we didn't and had the conversation.
All right. If you made it this far, go ahead and type Post-it notes so we'll know you're one of the real ones who stick around to the end.
And be sure to join our free Patreon tier and check out one of the videos that's on the screen right now.